So welcome everyone to the 5th edition of Charm Chats. Today we are very, very fortunate to be joined by Kat Harrison. So thank you, Kat, for signing in so early and coming on to speak with us.
No worries.
So,
hi everyone.
A quick intro of Kat, which is a very impressive intro. So Kat is the Director of Impact at 60 Decibels. And I'll give you a little overview of who they are. So 60 Decibels makes it really easy to listen to the people who matter most. In 2019, they were spun out of Acumen to create a new social enterprise that brings lean data to the world. So this is turning customers' voices into high-value insights that help businesses maximize their impact. They now have a network of more than 280 trained lean data researchers in more than 35 countries. They speak directly to customers to understand their lived experience. And so they combine voice, SMS, other technologies to remotely collect data with their proprietary survey tools. They then help clients listen more effectively and actually benchmark their social performance against their peers, which is revolutionary in the impact space. And we're going to dive into that a little bit later. So Kat herself leads the energy work. And actually, she was the one who helped to develop the sector's first impact benchmark through their lean data work. Prior to 60 Decibels, she was the Director of Research and Impact at SolarAid, where she developed and managed their award-winning research and impact work. She's chaired the Impact Working Group of the Global Off-Grid Lighting Associations from 2013 to 2017, and she led the development of their standardized impact metrics for energy access, which are used pretty much across the entire industry today. So a really huge achievement. She's previously been recognized as a young leader in renewable energy by Recharge and was a finalist for the Red Magazine Woman of the Year award for her work. So we are genuinely privileged to have you here today, Kat. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you. I wonder how long you get to count as being young for. I was just thinking as you said that.
I think forever. I think that just sticks now, you know. It's just going to be there. But so let's kick off. You can tell us just a bit about yourself as well. And actually, how did you get into impact measurement, which is still, I guess, relatively niche, and you've been doing it for quite some time?
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the intro. Like you said, it always makes everyone sound very cool when someone else gives the bio. So yeah, hi everyone. I think the way, I mean, let's settle in for a little story. I'll go right back. But, you know, from a really young age, I traveled around the world with my family, visiting different countries. And it really instilled in me this curiosity and commitment to sort of try and contribute to making the world a fairer place for all. And after university, so I studied economics and international development. So I'm actually an economist, I suppose. I worked at different types of entities, from the UN to traditional charity to social enterprises and Acumen, you know, an impact investor, where 60 Decibels spun out from. So I think my journey in this, it started out sort of in the monitoring and evaluation space, but evolved to focus more on research and then impact measurement. And for me, this feels much more actionable, more meaningful. You know, impact management is less about proving impact and much more about improving it. You know, it's less of an auditing top-down type of approach and more about sort of listening and taking action to do better. So yeah, that's kind of the journey that I went through to get to where I am.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, it seems like from economist to impact measurement expert sounds kind of weird, but the way you explain it, it kind of makes it work perfectly. So going on that theme, I guess one of the things also about 60 Decibels, I love companies that have like a really strong brand. And I think you guys have absolutely nailed it in the way that you present what 60 Decibels is, the brand image, everything else. But for those who don't know, can you explain to us why you called 60 Decibels, and then how that relates to how your like approach and outlook for impact measurement, it really differs to traditional research. And it'd be great to just explore that a little bit more.
Sure, yeah, thanks. So yeah, 60 decibels is the volume of human conversation. So it really embodies what we're about. You know, you said, Gabrielle, you know, listening to those who matter most, and more often than not, that means beneficiaries, end users, customers, staff, employees, agents. You know, it's staggering to me how often theories of change or log frames or impact frameworks are developed at a desk in London or New York or Nairobi, with very little stakeholder voice or input or insight used. And I think one key difference between impact measurement and traditional research is the space to allow those we're seeking to serve or to improve, contribute to improve lives, to allow them to define what impact means. What matters most to a family using a solar home system? What do they value most about their solar lantern? What impacts did they see from their connection to a mini grid? And so I think for us, it's really wedded to this listening, to understanding, to really trying to identify ways to maximize that value to people and recognize and respect them as intelligent, empowered people making decisions, particularly as we're working with mostly private sector companies, often not profit maximizing, social enterprises. But people vote with their feet or their wallet or their dollars. And so if you're not serving their needs, your social business isn't going to grow and scale. So actually it has this really nice kind of accountability element, I suppose. And so that's where I think it differs a little. It's about this action side of things, this really learning and understanding rather than ticking a box or sending a report or putting big numbers on a website to look great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so, when anyone who hasn't read any of your work, I've probably nerded out on far too much of it, but it's really, it's very different, the themes, the way it's presented. And I love the fact that this, again, sounds very nerdy, but the beauty of the way you capture the data and present it in a way that makes it meaningful, actionable, and comparable, I think is what's the really exciting part about your work, for me at least. And it's a good segue the way you framed it. I've got a little quote I'm just going to read from a book I've been reading recently, and then I'd love to hear your views on it. So it's a book called Impact by Sir Ronald Cohen. He's sort of the father of venture capital within the UK and a big pioneer in the impact investing world. And so his latest book, he says, if we regard impact investing as our rocket ship to social change, impact measurement is our navigation system. And he goes on to say it will lead change and the establishment of new norms. However, to achieve the widespread use of impact measurement, we need to completely rethink how we consider impact. For too long, we have assessed it in ways that are imprecise and inconsistent. And I thought I was reading this while preparing for this, and I was like, this is like exactly what you do. It captures you guys so well. And how does this resonate with you? And let's lead on to like, how has benchmarking, in particular, the amazing work you've done for the energy access industry in this space, like how has this started to make a difference, and how's that growing?
Yeah, I mean, I love the notion that we need impact measurement to navigate the impact investing rocket ship. I mean, ultimately, if you care about impacts, you're an impact investor, you're going to want to know if you're making it. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is to measure it. And with that, then hopefully you're going to go a step further and manage for it. So I think there's so many kind of ways that people are measuring impact where they're actually just estimating or projecting or calculating impacts. And I think one challenge has been that there are so many different methodologies, measures, frameworks, approaches that are out there. And I think that's somewhat led to the inconsistency, can feel overwhelming. And often I think people or organizations don't know where to start. But that's not a good enough reason not to do it, in our opinions. In fact, something we often say is start somewhere and keep it simple rather than trying to do everything. But I think that consistency piece is really critical for comparability and kind of, we believe, that can lead to more valuable insights to inform the deployment of capital as well as the actions of enterprises. It's key. It's also obviously key for enabling benchmarking. And this can be, super interesting to be able to put results into context as well as learn from others. By using these standardized indicators, questions, or approaches, we're able to see, which enterprises are highest performing. And from that, we can identify what business models, practices, or processes can sort of help maximize impact and hopefully see that benchmark as a sector go up over time as those in the benchmark, start to take action. So, it's been both validating and fascinating developing and enhancing our benchmark in off-grid energy access particularly. We've got over 100 energy enterprises in the database, so we can really start to see trends by region, by subsector, by price point, by gender, and start to see these trends across the sector more broadly, which is just as critical.
Yeah.
I mean, just to make it tangible, for example, like a core area of focus across the board, you know, for investors, enterprises, other sectors, you know, is ensuring we're not leaving anyone behind, that we as a sector are reaching off-grid low-income communities. And that might not be through impact investing solely. It might have to be through aid or potentially through subsidy programs. But having that information so we know what we're actually doing and informing what we do is key. So I think, you know, this measurement and benchmarking can also help to create not just this information, but it's accountability and transparency. You know, we're not at a place yet where people are always comfortable sharing results, but I think us at 60 Decibels, but like, we envisage a day where social accounting is just as mainstream and expected as financial accounting. Like, how can you be an operating business in the world and you just look at numbers, like your financial numbers? There isn't any interest in the value, the benefit, your net kind of positive or negative you put out into the world. So I think that's where we're at, a long way behind financial accounting, but I think that's how we kind of view the world and how we hope the world will kind of start to, the direction it will start to go in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there was a big turning point. I don't have enough of the details, but whereby financial accounting was also done differently globally, right? There was no financial accounting standards. And so people just went all over the show and did their own ways. And there was no real accountability because you had your own methodology. And once there was a standardized accounting methodology that we now have globally, it changed everything because we could then do that direct comparison. And I'd love to dive into one of it, and you know, extending that what you're saying for impact, we hope that will be the same. And the challenge is how we get there faster and sooner. Because I guess one of the challenges I had with the way you were framing something, and I think it resonates with a lot of what people think, is if we can't measure it, we can't manage it, so we're just not going to do it. Right. And it's for me, it's a poor excuse because it's a justification for not doing something when you know it's the right thing to do. And if people don't engage, it can never happen. And I guess, what do you think is that tipping point within this framework of getting a standard for an industry? So like with off-grid energy, okay, it's a very niche industry, but having 100 companies to compare like for like, that's huge, right? Within the constraints of the industry. Where do you see that going for other sectors, other, you know, parallels that we can draw, and where's that tipping point for each industry that we start having reliable benchmarks or standards that we can look at?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I do think there has been a change in the last kind of 5-10 years around, and an improvement in terms of how openly we are starting to talk about what isn't working as well as what is. But like I said, I think so often in the sector, and this is what I'd like to change, and I think we need to, is I think often impact is assumed to be positive. The way we use the word, it can sort of imply that. And hopefully, like, it's net positive what we're all doing. But I don't think there's always enough focus on the negative effects of our work. And I think this impact measurement can still often be about looking to validate positive impact for celebration, with not enough focus on this learning and opportunities for course correction. So I think that is what might start to kind of get us towards that tipping point where people recognize the value of it beyond just, you know, this reporting, this putting, you know, numbers on a website, more about this opportunity to grow and learn and improve. And again, not purely just for impact. Just like I tend to think, you know, like the impact of a product or service, and the way you know, a family in East Africa talks to their neighbors about their solar home system, that's synonymous with customer value proposition if you're collecting those insights. And so if you start to listen to, what do you value about the solar home system? That's amazing. Let's put that in our marketing materials because it resonates with people rather than what we think. And so you can then start to see, and the bit we love, or kind of the area we sit in, is this close interlink between, you know, customer insights and impact and business success and growth. And I think that's where sometimes that's what I think will help shift us towards the tipping point where people doing it well start to see the value. And it's not just this, there's impact measurement and then there's like business strategy, but actually really, like, if you're doing it well, it's kind of all the same thing or informing the same things. So yeah, I think, you know, something we've focused on, and I think this is another thing for the sector which is interesting, which is always like a discussion, perennial debate, I suppose, which is, should we do it in-house or should we outsource, and should we use consultants? And I think one thing we focused on is like, we provide an unbiased, balanced view of what's working and what's not. We don't have an agenda other than just to help inform. And I think that can be really helpful for getting those really honest, open insights. And so I think can then feel like less of a big hurdle for thinking I need to build a whole, customer insights team. Actually, I think there's a lot of opportunities to work with partners or experts, not just us, of course, but who are doing that, and that is their core work. So hopefully they're quite good at it. And I think one last thing. We deliver our lean data projects with some investors in their due diligence process. So when they're considering an investment. And so I think using measurement at this point to make informed decisions about where to invest capital demonstrates this real commitment to impact, rather than just, an afterthought for reporting post-investment. And I think it provides this really nice opportunity or sort of learning with an attention on areas of focus. The results are often used to determine areas of strategic focus to allow the funder and investor to align on vision. So I think that starting to think about the where and how and at what parts of the process impact insights and measurement are used, I think can help to then inform and shape and demonstrate the value of how it can be used to make decisions to, both for impact and business good, I suppose.
Yeah, 100%. It's something we look at Charm, and we have maybe not quite as rigorous as you might have for a full impact assessment by 60 decibels just yet, but whereby we look at, when we're working on our credit score for a company, we also look at the impact, and that feeds to the price we offer to them. But then the second part is, in the way we're tracking their financial performance and their repayments, how are they doing on their operations? How are they achieving their impact? And how does that change over time? So in the same way we can see a credit score improving, how are we seeing an impact score improve, and how do we combine those two? So in the way we might, in a pitch deck, you would project your financial performance, your operational overcount. How do you project your impact performance? How do we see that shifting over time to demonstrate impact at scale and bake the two together? Which is really nice to see that kind of interlinking.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think those conversations do then help to align, like, is this the right investor for me as well? So you're demonstrating this is what we care about, and we're going to support you to achieve that. And they're just like social enterprises, impact investors too. There's quite a spectrum between like investor and impact. People sit on very different ends of the scale. So I think it could be helpful for identifying the best people to match with.
100%. And I guess following on from this, how have you seen those improvements in the impact monitoring, impact measurement? How have you seen that shift in impact investment over time? And maybe a forward-looking view, where would you like that to go in the future? Like, how do we go even further?
Yeah. So like I said, I think a lot of it is that there is not enough, but an improved commitment to understanding. I think that's it, to understanding rather than just to reporting and auditing. And I think an increased recognition of the value that impact measurement or customer insights can play, that it goes beyond just this, I have to report this to my donor or my investors. So I think that's really helped over time, and that's linked to that what I was sort of saying about the, this net positive, recognizing that to really understand, we're going to need to understand what isn't working as well as what is. So hopefully we reduce, avoid, mitigate, plan for that. Often that's where we can have the biggest impact, by reducing those negative impacts rather than making tiny increments to the positive impacts. I think that's often where the focus actually needs to be. I think, like, in terms of where we'd love to see this go, I think it's about seeing lean data, impact measurement more broadly. There are other ways of doing impact measurement, I should say. I think it's about seeing it done more broadly. To be the norm, not the exception. And we need to see funders and donors put budgets behind their talk of commitment to impact to ensure it's adequately funded. And I would love to see, we talked about, a deeper openness to sharing results at an enterprise or a portfolio level. If we have this position towards learning, we're more likely to reach development goals more broadly. There's some balance, I understand, especially as the energy access sector becomes more competitive. There's a competitive advantage about understanding some of I think if we're talking about achieving broad development goals, I think, yeah, there needs to be more investment put into understanding what is happening and whether we're making good progress and who we're missing or leaving behind. And I think there needs to be this sort of openness to talking about what is and isn't working at like a real level. Sometimes you see these reports saying, oh, this didn't go so well, but it's the equivalent of me saying in an interview, well, my weakness is being a perfectionist. You know, it's not really, you're not really being like authentic about opportunities to do better, I think.
Yeah. No, it's a really good example. And I think that moving away from just looking at it as a report, it's a must do. And also, I think we see that with companies you talk to, they'll naturally brand themselves saying, oh, we're trying to reach XYZ because they know it's what an investor might want to hear. But actually, it might not be baked into their goals. And similarly, it might skew their unit economics if they actually did that and they don't have a viable business anymore. So they need to balance the two. And it's kind of that being honest with yourselves as to what you're trying to do, but also then for us as investors to be working out exactly like, what are they saying? Is it true? Does it stack up? Is this truly at the heart of their mission, or is it just branding, you know?
And interestingly, it sometimes doesn't come from the enterprise level where, you know, an impact investor says, we're investing in you to serve low-income populations. But as that company grows and they want to see returns, they're like, oh, but you need to be selling, you need to higher margins on your products. So then they move up market because you get higher margins on larger products. And then they're serving wealthier families. And so So often there's a difference between people's expressed commitment to who target communities or target populations and the realities of what that might look like in terms of returns or success from a financial perspective. So that's been interesting to observe that across the off-grid energy sector, as companies have matured and started not quite full commercial capital, but started to move towards, they've struggled with this requirement for higher returns on investment, which has pushed them up market, which has pushed them further away from serving some of their initial core markets. And that's why you see much less talk in the last 5 years in the sector about solar lanterns. Everyone's talking about solar home systems and appliances and devices and productive use. They're moving up. And one thing we see is that actually the marginal benefit, the marginal impact of a solar lantern is much greater than a home system, because you're a lower income family moving from a polluting kerosene lamp rather than moving from a solar light or two to a home system. So not to say solar home systems aren't having impact, but just actually it's bigger, it's more dramatic, it's more transformative for a family to move up that lower rung. And again, that might be where government subsidies, charitable sector comes in. But it is interesting to see this evolution as the market matures and evolves a little bit, how investors are pushing a little bit more for returns because they see they're out there, but it shifts then who they're actually reaching or serving.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think it'll end up, hopefully it finds us a stasis where we work out what's a commercially viable for-profit model and what's actually better suited to maybe not-for-profit models that serve people in different ways to achieve impact because they can't make them commercially viable through the route they're trying to take. So I think we're still at the early stage, and I think it will be interesting to see that balancing act come through. And as you say, you know, maybe government subsidies can come in and help, and it looks at the outcome they're trying to achieve rather than, and what's their real motivation and how do they stay in business? Because I guess if they keep distributing solar lanterns, but the impact's super high, but they go bankrupt afterwards, they no longer have any impact. And I think it's that balancing act, right, between working out the investor's mandate, the company's true vision and purpose, and actually what's commercially viable, and then bringing those together to actually create the ecosystem that works properly.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think we defined it at Acumen, there's 3 dimensions that we use to measure impacts, and it actually resonates. So there's breadth of impact, how many people you're reaching. That's often where people stop and start and they're just like, sales times 5 for household size. But actually that is a level of impact, right? Are you serving many people? The second was then about who you're serving. So for Acumen, they cared about serving low income. So then it was about, but what % of that people, that breadth of people, are living below the poverty line? And then the third element, which is very rarely done and what lead data really focuses on, is that depth of impact. How transformative or meaningful is that product or service? Because you could sell a pen to millions of people and they could all be like people living in poverty, but that's not really going to change their ability to move out of poverty. So it's interesting, I think, people, when they talk about impact, are sometimes just talking about breadth, because it's the easiest thing to, they're like, well, we've reached lots of people. But what we're saying is, but who are those people, and how meaningful is that service, that intervention, that product, or whatever it is that you were investing in? So I think it can be a helpful framework for thinking about how we define and think about impact.
Yeah, and I think a good thing about that it highlights is having a vision as an investor. What is your impact mandate, right? What is that thesis you are trying to grow, and then how do you stay true to it? You know, and if having those pillars at the outset, I think is a useful reminder, at least, to say, why are we making this choice? Why are we working with this company? Why are we doing those things we're doing? But having that very clear mandate up front, and also knowing then when you shift, it's a purposeful shift rather than just kind of creeping away from what you initially had. But yeah, so really interesting. And I guess, why don't let's dive in, I guess, a little bit on you. What are your, I mean, you listen, and I love, if anyone doesn't follow Kat's Twitter, it's great with lots of different insights that are shared from direct customers. And I'd love to hear some of your favorites. Like, what are some of the things that you've heard throughout the journey of doing this for the last 5-6 years? Like, what does that look like? And what are some of your favorite snippets you've had?
Yeah, I mean, it's been fun, all these different layers, from impact investors to the social enterprises to the customers. I mean, at a customer level, I have, even though I've been doing this for years, I have never got tired of opening a database and reading quotations and voices, and because that's what it's about. That's why, isn't that why all of us do what we do, to try and help contribute to making everyone's lives a little bit better? You know, one of my all-time favorite quotations, and I can still say it because I remember it in my head. It was this mother in Malawi who said, "We live a happy life now when darkness comes." And like, it kind of gives me goosebumps, because it makes you think about just so much of what we take for granted. But light plays such a critical part of life and connection and safety. And so yeah, I love reading that stuff, and that's really what matters. But I think some of the things that have really kind of triggered for me that this link, I suppose, between the business insights versus the impact insights. You know, one of my favorite conversations, this was a while back, but was with an energy access company working in East Africa with the CEO. And so they had this 3-light solar home system. We're mostly distributing to families who are moving from, you know, the kerosene lamps or a small solar lantern to these home systems. And when we talked to their customers, which they hadn't really done before, mainly because often people don't have the resources, the expertise, the time. 2 key sort of design themes came out in all of the responses and feedback. And so they wanted bulbs, one of the bulbs, to be outside the house as a security light. So it needed to be designed differently, more durable, and maybe like a sensor light. And they wanted the portability of a solar lantern as well, for moving outdoors to the kitchen, or walking back from the village at night, or checking their compound at night. And the company hadn't really thought about those kind of differences in usability. And so they worked with their manufacturing partner and updated it. And you'll see to this day, I'm sure it wasn't just because of us, but you'll see to this day, a lot of the solar home system packages have one of the bulbs is meant to sit outside the house, and it has a sensor. And quite often it will come with this portable light you can use for moving around. But I think it really demonstrates, you know, how listening and acting really can maximize impact and better meet needs, and how easy it was for us to just say, what suggestions do you have for improvement? Like, it's not a hard thing to do. It's not rocket science. You don't need your rocket ship to work this out, or your astronauts on board. You just need to listen. You just need to say what would work well. And so that's a really interesting one, in terms of it better meets needs, it maximizes impact, but also it supports companies to grow because they're better serving their customers. So people are demanding their products. So I think it's a really nice example of how this listening piece can have these kind of positive impacts in both scale and growth, as well as impact as well.
Absolutely. And I had a similar story once of someone designing their solar off-grid refrigerator, and they'd made it really colorful and jazzy, and no one bought it. And then they asked the customers why, after they spent ages doing all this design work, and they said, we want a white good, because that's what shows our aspiration. We want a standard white fridge. That's what we want. And they thought, no, let's make it really exciting, everything else. And you're right, it's really interesting on that kind of basic sounding feedback loop. But if you have that embedded at the outset, it's not just about the impact, right? It actually makes your business better. It makes business commercial sense from
Totally.
listening. And I think that's the tipping point, maybe, right? It's when people can appreciate that. That's when everything transitions.
Yeah. Yeah. When they see the value in it beyond just,
Yeah,
ticking these boxes.
for sure. And I guess, all right, we're almost out of time. I'm enjoying this far too much. But so maybe one last question for us, if we can, before we wrap up, would just be like, how do you see this evolving? So we're still, I guess, at a pretty nascent stage. Let's take a 3-year time horizon. What does this look like? And how does impact measurement become, and listening to our customers actually become the catalyst for change to achieve universal energy access?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think some of it's what we've chatted about a bit already. So increased accountability and transparency, deeper commitment to listening and understanding to inform action, and for achieving sort of universal energy access, it's about focusing on making sure we're not leaving anyone behind. At 60 Decibels, we've been working on a kind of building or updating or improving our impact indices, like indexes. So reflecting on the ones we've built and how we make them even more accessible and relevant for each sector and across the board. We're always a little wary of trying to, compare apples to oranges. But I think there's a lot of opportunity, a little bit like you're saying, or we were saying about inconsistency and just the plethora of, approaches out there. I think it's about, an opportunity to learn better by zooming out to understand what is and isn't working and shaping how we might navigate for that kind of positive change by equipping people with those insights. So I think the benchmarks are a catalyst for change already in the energy access sector. Enterprises and funders have better insight than ever before on their relative performance, and I think us reaching a tipping point of having those insights to hand, to be better able to understand, drive towards action, meet customer needs. I think that's going to highlight the different role that different stakeholders need to play as well. So, just like any other sector, the most vulnerable are unlikely to be reached by the market. And so I think that helps us. We need to see like this continued commitment from governments and the nonprofit sector in collaboration with the private sector to really achieve those goals. And I think that's kind of linked to the impact measurement, because it helps us actually know what we're working with and what we're driving towards.
Amazing. Kat, we are unfortunately out of time. I love that, though, being able to see the relative performance, zooming out before we can zoom back in, giving us that context, I think is going to be an exciting place to see. So thank you so much for your time. I think we might have to do this again because I have so many more questions for you. But this was great. And thank you so much for sharing your insights. And yeah, thank you for joining us for our Charm Chat, and we'll speak to you soon.
Awesome. Good to chat to you. And if anyone on the line you have questions, just send us an email. As you can tell, me and Gabrielle are very excited about these topics.
Thanks so much, Kat. Speak soon.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.